The end of Parashat Mishpatim goes back to Mamad Har Sinai, and it talks about the Brit, the covenant between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and between Am Yisrael that was forged at Sinai. So we have Mamad Har Sinai, Aseret HaDibrot, that's the revelation, that's in Parashat Yitro, and then you have the covenant, and that's in Parashat Mishpatim. There's an argument among the commentators, according to Rashi, and actually it's the dominant position in Chazal, that the Parashat Mishpatim, the covenant, actually preceded the revelation of Har Sinai, the Aseret HaDibrot, but it was brought afterwards. Vel Moshe Amar, in the past tense, Rashi comments, Parashat Zu ne'emra kodem Aseret HaDibrot, u'va'arba'a b'sivan ne'emra lo alei. When it says, Alei al Hashem, that Moshe Rabbeinu should go up, that was said in the 4th of Sivan, when of course the revelation, Aseret HaDibrot, was either on the 6th or on the 7th, according to some positions. The Ramban argues, and in general the Ramban was much more faithful to the Seder of the Parshios, and he said that they were aligned with the chronological order of events. So the Ramban argues on Rashi, V'nei Maseh Brit, the covenant, B'yom HaMacharat L'Matan Torah, came after Har Sinai, after Aseret HaDibros. So then there was the Parsha of Mishpatim, and then afterwards they come and they have the covenant. Uvay Tahaliyah Shalom Moshe Har Sinai, and then Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Har Sinai. V'chol zeh metukanim uvuar. So the Ramban basically is faithful to the order of the Psukim. He says that it follows chronological order. So according to both, you have a separation between the revelation and between the covenant, and the question is whether the covenant came before chronologically, yes or no. Okay, what's behind that argument? We're not going to discuss right now, but there is a certain importance which we'll discuss later. In any event, within the context of the covenant, the pasuk says, "Vaya'al Moshe v'Aaron Nadav v'Avihu v'shivim miziknei Yisrael vayiru et Elokei Yisrael v'tachat raglav k'masel v'nat hasapir v'chetzam hashmayim netor." Moshe, Aaron, the 70 sages, and Nadav and Avihu, the 2 elder sons of Aaron, went up to the Har, and there they saw some kind of a vision of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then the pasuk says, "Va'alatzilei b'nei Yisrael lo shalach yado." HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't smite the nobles of Israel. Vayechezu et Elokim. They saw God. They had some kind of a vision as if they saw God. Vayochlu vayishtu, and they ate and they drank. There's an argument among the Mefarshim how to view this pasuk of Vayechazu et Elokim vayochlu vayishtu. According to the Targum Onkelos, there was nothing wrong. U'Rabbi Yisrael lo havin nizka, there was they weren't harmed, and they saw the glory of God. And then they brought vayochlu vayishtu. It's not that they ate and drank, but they brought a korban. A korban has part that goes on the mizbeach and part that you have a nesach of yayin that you pour on, and that's analogous to vayochlu vayishtu. It's not talking about physically eating or drinking, but they brought a korban and it was accepted by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore there was absolutely nothing wrong that they did. Okay. On the other hand, this, as a matter of fact, if you talk about religious experience and the simcha, the joy that one has when one experiences God, one can even understand that it's referring to actually eating and drinking. For instance, when they go aliyah l'regel, so one of the mitzvahs is to bring a shami simcha. You go up, you have joy in the fact that you have this religious experience of going up to the regel and experiencing God. And one of the ways of expressing that experience is by eating and drinking. And that's a simcha. The Rambam in Hilchos Chagiga writes, "Ha-simcha ha'amura b'regalim, hi she'yakiv shlamim, ve'elu nikrim shami simcha, shenemar ve'zavachta shlamim, ve'achalta sham ve'samach l'fnei Hashem Elokecha." So the eating the basar of the shlamim is a way of expressing simcha. The Rambam goes on to say that nowadays we don't have a mikdash, so the way we have to have simcha is basar and yayin and maybe other ways as well. But when one has a religious experience and one expresses the simcha, since we are human beings, by eating and drinking, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So this idea of vayechaz Elokim vayochlu vayishtu is not to be critical of them, but it shows how excited and how they were and how joyful they were regarding the religious experience. On the other hand, Rashi brings a medrash, and it's also found in the Targum that we attribute to Yonatan ben Uziel. Rashi says, "Hayu mistaklim bo belev gas mitoch achilu shtia." It was they ate and they drank while they were singing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and there was something wrong with that. They're being critical of the fact that they ate and they drink, and they drank when experiencing God. Experiencing God is an elevating experience, and to go ahead and to express that by eating and drinking, there was something wrong over here. And this really ties into a more general question regarding the personalities of Nadav and Avihu. According to Deus and Chazal, it's referring to Asliya Bnei Yisrael, it's referring specifically to Nadav and Avihu, the two children of Aaron, who eventually, after they built the Mikdash, on Yom HaShmini of the Mikdash, they brought out Eish Zara Shelot Tziva Hashem, and they were killed. They were destroyed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So, according to Edea and Chazal, they were supposed to be destroyed at this point, at Har Sinai, because Vayechazu Elokim Vayochel Vayishtu. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, now's not the time. Now's the time of celebrating the Torah, and now's not the time to kill Nadav and Avihu. Later on, when the Mikdash is inaugurated, at that time they'll be paid for what they did wrong over here. So, in the Targum that's attributed to Yonatan ben Uziel has that, and the Midrashim has that. In other words, Vayochel Vayishtu can kind of trace and eventually culminates in what Nadav Avihu did on Yom HaShmini when they brought in Eish Zara Asher Lo Tziva Hashem. They weren't commanded, and they brought in Eish Zara, and they were destroyed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It goes back to what they did at this point. And there are a lot of different midrashim that try to actually pinpoint what exactly was the problem of Nadav and Avihu. For instance, in Vayikra Rabbah, Rab Levi Amar Shachtzanim Hayu. There were a lot of shidduchim that people wanted to offer for Nadav Avihu, and they refused. They're not good enough for us, and they refused. Avinu Melech, Achei Imenu Nasi, Avinu Kohen Gadol, Varu Shnei Skanei Kuna, where the Skanei Kuna, Ezo Isha Ogenet Lanu. No, there's nobody. They're not worthy of us. Another indication of that position that they felt that they were better than everybody else is the continuation of the Medrash. Melamed shahayu Moshe v'Aaron holchim tchila, v'Nadav Avihu mahalchim achreim. Nadav Avihu would follow Moshe and Aaron as they were walking, and they would say, "When will these two elders die? Pass on, and we will begin to lead the people." In other words, they were critical of the older leadership. There were a lot of problems from going out of Mitzrayim until they reached this point, certainly until building the Mishkan. There was the Chet HaEgel, and they felt that they could do it better. And they felt that they were full of really of a lot of hubris, and they felt that they were better than everybody else. There were no women that were right for them, and they could do also better than these elders, Aaron and Moshe. The Medrash continues, Lo meitu shnei bnei Aaron ela aidei shahu halacha lefnei Moshe Rabban. You're not allowed to be more halacha in front of your Rebbe. If your Rebbe is there, you have to ask him what to do. And they pass him for themselves. Again, showing that hubris that they had. The Netziv writes, Shenichneshu me'et hitlavut shel avat Hashem. In other words, it's not that they weren't religiously excited. They were. And they had Avat Hashem. And they ran and they wanted to get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And they brought Eish Zara Shelot Tziva Hashem. V'amr Torah da'afa gav da'avat Hashem yikarahi, even though it's a wonderful thing, aval lo b'zeh derech Shelot Tziva. But nevertheless, you can't go into the Heichal without being commanded to go in. In other words, what the Netziv is picking up on is by going in, Shelot Tziva Hashem means that they felt that they deserved that religious experience. And they were on a level where they could appreciate it. And therefore, because they were very, very religious and full of Avas Hashem, so they felt they could go into the Mikdash. and because they were deserving of it. And they were deserving of going up on Har Sinai. And therefore, when they went up on Har Sinai and they had an experience of God, vayochu vayishtu. They were very, very callous regarding that experience. They felt that they were deserved. They felt that they were privileged. They felt that they were basically the princes, the religious princes of Am Yisrael, the two eldest children of Aaron HaKohen, the nephews of Moshe, the nephews of Nachshon ben Aminadav. They felt they were privileged, and they felt that they were right. Now, the Netziv says that Avas Hashem was very, very impressive. On the other hand, it has to be modified by Yiras Hashem. The pasuk in Tehillim says, "B'veit Elokim nalech b'ragesh." You go in excitedly into the house of God. But in Koheles it says, "Shmar raglecha kasher telech el beit Elokim." When you go into the house of God, be very, very careful. In other words, a religious experience, going into the presence of God, you can't feel that you're deserved to God. The distance that separates man from God is infinite. And to feel that human beings should feel that he's roi and that he deserves to have that religious experience is not understanding the essence of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu commands you and allows you to go in and calls upon you, well, then I understand that then you're allowed to go. But to feel that you deserve it and you can go without being commanded, that's already taking things a little bit too far. There has to be some kind of a balance between Avas Hashem and feeling that, yearning to get close to God, but also Yiras Hashem, and realizing that you're not Roi, that you don't deserve to see and to experience of Kadosh Baruch Hu. And then we take a look at Parashat Shmini. Vayichu bnei Aaron nadav avihu ish machtarto, vayilu behem eish v'asum ketores, vayakriv Hashem eish zara shelo tziva Hashem, and then they were killed. And in Zvachim, and Daf Kuf Tesvav Amid Beis, they bring a brisa. The brisa refers to the dialogue between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Moshe Rabbeinu immediately before the revelation of Aseret HaDibros. The Tanya, V'gam HaKohanim HaNigashim El Hashem Yitkadashu, Pen Yifros Behem Hashem. The Kohanim HaNigashim El Hashem, according to Rebbe, is referring to Nadav and Avihu. V'hainu Dichtiv, Hu Asher Diber Hashem B'Krovai Kadesh. After they were destroyed, Hashem said, "That's what I told you, B'Krovai Kadesh, because I already warned you. HaKohanim HaNigashim Yitkadashu Pen Yifros Behem Hashem." According to Rashi, the Nadav and Avihu had already failed when they went up to Har Sinai. Vayechazu et Elokim vayochlu vayishtu. But nevertheless, they were spared at that point. And then before the revelation, which came 2 days afterwards, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe, "V'gam HaKohanim HaNigashim Hashem, Nadav and Avihu should be careful. Pen Yifros Behem." And one, shudders to realize that they weren't careful and they didn't take that warning. And later on, when the Mikdash was created, they went they took an Ezara, Asher Lo Tziva Hashem, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Poretz Bam. Now, when you juxtapose Nadav Avihu on the one hand to Moshe Rabbeinu on the other hand, when you talk about Moshe Rabbeinu who asked to have a religious experience, Hareinu das kvodecha. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "Ani avir kol tuvi al panecha, v'karati b'shem Hashem lefanecha, v'chanoti et asherachon, v'yomer lo tuchal lerot et panai." You want to experience, it's possible, but lo tuchal lerot et panai, whatever Pnei Hashem is, that you cannot see. Ki lo yirani adam v'chai. Man can't survive that. The difference between God and man is infinite. Man can't possibly see the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whatever that means. Vayom Hashem hinei makom iti nitzavta al tzur, vaya ba'avor kvodi v'samticha et kapi v'sakoti kapi alecha al ovri, v'ra'it et achorai u'panai ro. You will see my back, you will not see my face. Of course, all this is simply mishalim, because there's no back and there's no face. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not physical. But it means you will see something. You will not be able to see something, a very, very close and intimate experience. It'll be more distant. It'll be achorai panai leiro. The Chazal referred to this as kesher shel tefillin. They saw the kesher shel tefillin. Achorai is where you have the kesher of the tefillin shel rosh. You'll see the kesher shel tefillin. Now, the Paitan in Anur says, Kesher Tfilin Herale Anav. In other words, the Moshe Rabbeinu that did manage to experience God, Hareini Nat Kvodecha, to the extent that it was humanly possible. Why was he Zoche? Because he was an Anav. Because he didn't have hubris, religious hubris, but rather he had humility. Kesher Tfilin Herale Anav. And therefore the Paitan specifically uses the term Anav when referring to that great moment of Ra'isa Sachurai. The continuation of that great moment, or actually the realization of the great moment, are the Yirgil Midos Sarachimim. Ani Avirtu Vayavar Shem Alpanav Vayikra Hashem Hashem Kel Rachum V'Chanun. That was the great experience of the Yirgil Midos. And the Paitan, when we say Slichos, Kel Reit Lanu Mashlosh Esrei, Uzachar Lanu Hayom B'Rish Shlosh Esrei, the bris of the Yirgil Midos, Kemo Shadata Le'anav Mikedem. And again, the Paitan uses what term? How does it describe Moshe Rabbeinu, who experienced the bris of Yirgel Midos? Kasher Hodata Le'anav Mikedem. It was Moshe Rabbeinu's humility that allowed him to reach the heights that he reached. But if one comes and approaches God with the hubris and feels that he deserves to have that experience of God, then it creates a problem. So on the one hand, you have Beit Elokim Nilech B'Ragesh, to be excited about the possibility of experiencing God, and on the other hand, Shma Raglecha Kasher Telech El Beit Elokim. You have to also be careful. You have to balance Avas Hashem with Yiras Hashem. You have to have humility when one approaches God.